I thought my new job was going to be easy. Written by Ruse 85. After many years of working in a stressful environment, I decided it was time for a change of scenery and to get into something less challenging, less stressful. After getting my security license, I landed the night shift at a major construction site. All I had to do was sit in a cabin all night watching the cameras. This was the life, I thought, and the pay wasn't bad either. When I got to the site, I was met by my boss, Mike. I didn't much like Mike. He was a slob of a man, and he was grumpy. But thankfully for me, he was just dropping me the keys to the site. Now, after some small talk and a handshake, he hands me the keys. Before he got into the van, he turns to me and asks me if I had heard what happened to the last guy that worked here. Having been new to the job, I said no, and I asked him if he knew. He got into his van and started up the engine, then rolled down the window and looked at me and said, "No one knows. He came here to work one night and was gone by morning, never to be seen again." Then he just drove off. What Mike said to me unnerved me a bit. I was barely in the gate and I was getting the jitters already. The first thing I noticed was the site wasn't lit up all that great. There were 2 spotlights at either end of the site. The poor lighting caused the diggers, the dump trucks, and the cranes to cast grotesque shadows around the site. I knew that they were only shadows, but they were really horrifying for some strange reason. The first night was pretty uneventful. So what I had seen the second night, I put down to being really tired. I was struggling to get used to the night routine, and I hadn't slept much. My nocturnal clock was somewhat out of whack and just needed to adjust. As I sat there, trying my best to stay awake and drinking cup after cup of coffee, I heard a roar come from the back of the site. It made me jump off my seat and instantly jump-started my senses. I jumped to the cameras. I couldn't see anyone, but I did notice the shadows seemed to be moving about. They looked frantic. The shadows seemed like they were attacking each other, like predators fighting over their prey. I was starting to think that the lack of sleep was starting to play tricks on me because I could swear that I could hear them growling and roaring. It went on for the entire night, and only stopped when it began to get bright. I made sure that I was well rested for my third night. My mind wasn't going to be playing tricks on me this time. As I sat there watching the cameras, I noticed the shadow creatures were still there. They looked like they were lying in wait for something. It almost looked like they were stalking my cabin. As I was studying the cameras, I see 2 men enter the site. They were definitely acting strangely, and I wasn't expecting any company. I sat there for a minute, watching their movements, when I noticed the shadow creatures were also watching their movements. It looked like they were stalking their prey, waiting for their moment to attack. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way onto the site. As I searched around, I could see all the shadows had made their way to the back of the site. They seemed more ferocious than usual. As I get close, I hear a gut-wrenching scream. I started running towards the screams. As I'm nearing the back of the site, I could hear someone being attacked, as if they're being ripped apart. I get to where the screams are coming from, and I find nothing. There seemed to be no sign of anyone or anything being in the area. I called out to whoever I saw on the camera, and I get no answer. As I'm looking around, the shadow creatures start closing in on me. I shine my flashlight on them and they dart away as if they're scared of the light. I start making my way back to the cabin while keeping the shadow creatures at bay with my light. The flashlight starts flickering on and off. As it flickers, the shadow creatures start closing in on me again. I pick up my pace. As I do, so do the creatures. As the creatures come at me like a pack of wild animals, I find myself running for my life. With the shadow creatures clawing at my heels, I make it back to the cabin. I slammed the door shut behind me, and I hear the creatures descending on the cabin. I look at the camera pointing at the cabin, and strangely, I couldn't see anything. But something was definitely trying to rip the cabin to shreds, trying to get at me. I could hear the aluminum sheets that make up the roof of the cabin being ripped from the rivets holding them in place. The window of the cabin smashes, showering me in glass. As I cower under the table, I realized that I was about to find out what happened to the last guy that worked here. As I huddled under the table, waiting to die, I hear a van pull up outside the cabin. The lights from the van shine through the smashed window. The creatures had stopped. The ripping and smashing had stopped. The creatures appeared to have retreated back into the dark corners of the building site. As I laid there, huddled under the table just in case, in walked Mike. Never had I been so thankful and delighted to see someone in my entire life. I jumped up from the floor and hugged him. Mike didn't seem fazed by the whole incident. He just looked at me and said, "Not another one." By the following week, I was settled back into my painfully stressful but safe day job. I did do one thing before I left. I was sure to leave a note for the next guy who got the job. Watch out for the shadow creatures. Asian Vampire Ghost Story by 4IHAR4. So, this story is as old as my uncle. He's around 70 today. So this all happened way back when he was a teen, so it was somewhere in the late 60s or early 70s. I'm not sure exactly when. So here's the routine. Every time school ended, my uncle would walk home with his sister. In my country back in the 70s, everything was pretty much rural, and my uncle lived in a rural village. Going home from school could be very, very scary. There was only a road illuminated by oil lantern streetlights, and on the far left was a dense palm oil plantation. My uncle's sister warned him that while walking home to never stare directly towards the palm oil plantation or the coconut trees hanging over the road. He should also never acknowledge anything peculiar like a sound or a smell. So, my uncle's sister was sick one day, and he had to walk home from school all alone. Being 14 at the time, he needed to man up, my uncle's father said to him. So yeah, extra classes ended and he's on his way home. And just as I said, he's overwhelmed over how calm the night is. The lanterns were just barely bright enough to illuminate the road, and suddenly he smelt a very sweet scent. But he brushed it off, and he chalked it up to the fact that maybe the perfume lady had just walked by here, because he knew the perfume lady lived nearby, and he continued his journey home. But as he continued forward, the scent just got stronger and stronger. Now he acknowledged the smell and began to ask himself why the smell was getting stronger. And then shivers went down his spine as he heard a sweet voice humming a tune. And he said to himself, who would be out humming such a melancholy tune at this hour? He looked around, and much to his surprise, there was no one on the road. It was only the vast road surrounded by the palm plantations. He started getting weary of the condition in the area and started walking home a little faster. Unfortunately, the further he went, the stronger and stronger the smell got. And then the humming got louder and louder until finally he snapped. And he looked directly at the coconut tree hanging over the road, and there it was. A woman in white with black hair all over her face, as she kept singing that melancholy tune. Now, my uncle knows for a fact that he's being trailed by a Pontianic, that is, a Malay vampire. They're created when a woman dies while giving birth. He panics and begins running frantically, knowing that the Pontianic hasn't realized that he's there.
But unfortunately, he is her prey now. He ran faster and faster, and the smell and the noise stopped. But he can see her chasing him in the air as she cackled menacingly. Fortunately, however, he managed to get home safe and sound. He was as white as an albino alligator, and his fathers and siblings rushed over to him, knowing that he had seen a ghost or something. His father began to recite prayers over my uncle to make sure that he isn't going to be trailed by one of these things ever again. The House Down the Road by Ace 3984. So this happened a few years back when I was younger. Me and my family used to go up to Wisconsin to work in the fields. And in the workhouse we stayed in, it was pretty old. I found out the background of the house recently and that it was built in the early 1900s. Anyway, back to the story. My parents would go out to work in the early morning and came back around 10 o'clock in the night every day except Sundays. So, one day I had come back from school around 3 p.m. and I was home alone. And when I got home, I was pretty hungry, so I went downstairs to fix myself some tacos. As I am down there, I can hear footsteps from upstairs and I think to myself, what the? Each step just got louder and louder with the wood fork creaking louder each time as well. So some minutes passed and I'm still hearing the footsteps as I sit down to eat my tacos. And then I hear a scream, sort of resembling a little girl, and I hear her say, "No, Daddy, don't kill Mommy." And then the dad, I'm guessing, screams, "No, get out of here, Elizabeth." After that, I started to freak out and I made my way to the kitchen door. And as I'm making my way to the kitchen door, I hear 2 gunshots from upstairs. Once I got to the door, I heard footsteps making their way down the stairs, so I ran outside. As I'm outside, I hear a gunshot, and then complete silence. I'm completely freaked out by this, and I ran down the long dirt road that connected to the city. As I got there, I ran into the church and I patiently waited for my parents to return. When they got there, I explained to my parents what had happened, and my dad, who doesn't know any English, tried to communicate with the priest, and the priest explained to us that back in the day, a family had been killed. They had been killed by the father. He killed his daughter and his wife, and then himself, near the stairs. So that explains what I heard. I also learned that the city had condemned the building, but they didn't tell us anything and were letting us sleep there. Later on, we got a priest to come over and bless the house. It somewhat fixed the problem. There was some more paranormal activity throughout the house, from plates falling over to chairs and stuff going missing, but the priest said to just say some prayers every night before bed, and that you wouldn't encounter any more problems with these demons. Another story in that house was in the restroom downstairs. It had 2 doors. One door led to the hall and the other led to the basement. And well, one day we had a barbecue going on, and one of my aunts, Tia, went into the restroom, and as she's minding her own business, she said that she heard a knock on the door, like someone wanted to go. But she said that when she asked who it was, she got no response. Now keep in mind that everyone else was outside at the time, so there should have been no one in the basement to knock on the door. Well, that's all I've got about this. What are y'all's opinions? Do you think it was a ghost or demons? Let me know.